Well, hello there again, my friends, and welcome back to another fine episode of Carpo's Thoughts, or whatever the hell you want to call it. As usual, I'm sipping a fancy eggnog latte out of my special Grateful Dead cup, living my privileged life as an American. And all the while, never quite feeling like things are as they should be. This brings me to a discussion about psychedelics and hidden metrics, a variety of topics I wanted to discuss. I brought up suffering. In Buddhism, suffering is originally known as dukkha, and dukkha, of course, has many translations, and this has a point. Etymology, the changing of words over time, what they mean, how they're spelled, how they're used. Dukkha was a word that over time people started to believe that life is suffering, so therefore life is dukkha, that must mean suffering, when in fact it really meant, it was from the word asthathemata, I believe. But at any rate, it meant life is unstable. Unstable. And it really is. Our brains, we believe that we, have things figured out. And then one day everything comes crashing down. It happens to everybody at one time or another in their life, where just when we think we had it figured out, it all falls to pieces. It could be unstable, or another term would be unsteady. Another translation would be uneasy, disquieted. But any of them really lend more of a definition to the term of what life really is. Suffering comes from all of those things, but only if we allow it to. And that's not some bullshit, think positive type, quote or anything. It's just the truth. If the glass is half full, if we use our mental alchemy and our faculties to improve our lives, to see things in a positive light, it's much healthier for us as individuals. The minute we become cynical, we start to lose interest in life itself. And that's something I just can't face. Life is too precious. It's too amazing. Where do psychedelics come in here? I was introduced to LSD back around 1990, and I'm not going to go into my history, but let's just say that I had a long exploratory career where these things taught me that not only can your brain be clouded by taking certain substances, but it can be rewired in a different way. And over a period of years, I began to learn how to utilize these tools properly, respectfully, responsibly, like a sacrament. And feeling like I get the most out of the experience itself. And the reason that this has been so beneficial to me is because it's allowed to see myself and my life from a non-biased perspective. Not looking down on myself, not looking up to myself, just looking eye to eye with me and saying, who are you? What are you? And what do you want out of life? Maybe more importantly, what does life want out of you? I think human nature is to believe that we have that power, that it's our choice what we do with our lives. But we have our natures. We know when something feels right, when it flows, and when something doesn't. And it's different for everyone. As we're raised, we go into our teen years, our 20s, our 30s. Our brains become much more rigid and solidified. Neuroplasticity begins to diminish, the brain's ability to change and form new connections. This is due to protecting our brains from significant changes or solidifying these pathways, neural pathways. So this is the routine we have. We wake up every morning, have our coffee, do whatever we do. These things are built into our brains. It can take time to detach and dewire and untangle some of these habits, especially addictions. But it turns out with psychedelics, after shutting down the frontal cortex and allowing the brain to communicate in areas that ordinarily don't, then for people who have severe issues like depression, severe anxiety, PTSD, and or end-of-life fears, these can be greatly diminished by psychedelics. And I believe that's because it allows a person to see their wounds and sit beside their wounds, whether it's mental or physical. Trying to explain this to somebody who's never taken any psychoactive substance, it's impossible. Trying to define the feeling of going through these experiences is impossible. It's difficult to even explain to somebody what it's like to be drunk, for example. Anyone who's drank and knows somebody who doesn't drink, oh, you get dizzy, you might fall down, you might not feel well. You can't explain that feeling, let alone going through a tunnel into some detached world where you are yourself in another plane of existence and interacting with beings that may or may not be artifacts of your subconscious. And then coming back from this experience and feeling invigorated and renewed and ready to improve yourself and your life. This has been a vastly common experience throughout everyone I've ever talked to who's taken these substances. And it's fascinating to me. The fascinating part, and I think the funny part, is a lot of folks talk about a psychedelic renaissance or a psychedelic revolution. And I kind of become a little bit cynical about that because it's like an I told you so moment. Some of us have been screaming about psychedelics for years. Before my time, we had Terrence McKenna. Go on down the list, Ram Dass and otherwise known as Richard Alpert. I'm not going to bring up Timothy Leary too much because I believe he went over the top and spread the word a little too much. Instead of saying, here, this religion is available, not that it's a religion, but he was trying to proselytize, saying everyone should take this. And that's not true. Psychedelics are not for everyone. Some people are content and happy in the way that they are living their lives, and more power to them. But many of us want to see a little deeper within and try to understand ourselves. So from the time that psychedelics were made illegal in the 70s, 1970, up until the current day, a small group of people have been begging to do research on these things and been continuously denied as a Schedule I Class A substance that you can't even touch. This has changed now. Johns Hopkins paved the way. Now there are hundreds of clinics doing psilocybin therapy as well as ketamine therapy, which should have been brought to the masses a long time ago. They say that one dose of ketamine therapy can pull people out of depression when nothing else has worked. However, they're using it as a last resort treatment. After you've tried all these other SSRIs and pills, at least 2 different types, and had them not work after several months. Hell, if I had severe depression and I could go in for a treatment one time, I probably would. The problem here, and this is where I have an issue with the psychedelic revolution, is it's not a revolution, it's an evolution. It's been ongoing, and we've been saying this for a long time. So instead of a guy with a tie-dye sitting behind the camera talking about acid 10 years ago, now it's a doctor or a nurse or a psychologist. And many of these folks or a celebrity, all of a sudden it's safe. And this is good, don't get me wrong. It's good that psychedelics are safe to discuss now. But man, I just wish more people would have spoken up sooner. I know a lot did, but it's like people were afraid of the stigma. And now that the stigma has gone away from using these substances, you see, old Aunt Susie, taking mushrooms for her depression or something. And it's like, everybody's soccer moms, everybody can take these substances and benefit from them. And then it becomes more acceptable for other people that it's not just a bunch of hippies running around getting high. The hippies it was a side effect of how beneficial it was to your psyche. And this brings me to the dose, because I'm not giving a dose, but rather saying, if you continue to abuse any substance, it's going to work against you. If you took a psychedelic a couple times a year to get yourself back on track, that can be a wonderful thing for some people. If you take psychedelics every week, or forbid every day, like some of the people I've known in the past, you're doing yourself a great disservice, and it's working against you. And therefore, there's this illusion that we need a doctor to tell us how much to take. And the issue I have with this is I've been a member of, Arrowid since the 90s, arrowid.org, which is where all the trip reports and collections of psychedelic experiences are, and I've read thousands of them. Many psychonauts have. Many of us have explored really deep hidden dimensions and reprogrammed our brains to think more positively, to take on a new career, to eliminate fear, PTSD, whatever it might be. And meanwhile, the rest of the world was going on with their SSRI medication, the doctors and the system. Now, all of a sudden, we expect the doctors to have all the knowledge they need on how these psychedelics work. And I'm going to tell you, just like SSRIs, they don't know how they work. They don't really understand it. Yes, the LSD and psilocybin affect the HT2/5A receptors, and they're serotonergic, and they definitely have some effect on that system, a significant effect. But that's not the only system that's being affected. And when you, for example, take ketamine, that affects the glutamate receptors, a completely different system, yet can produce hallucinations as well, and that feeling of connection. I think that many of these substances, they interact in different ways with your body, and each person has a different body chemistry and has to find what they need. It's just like finding there's no one-size-fits-all pill or psychedelic or anything else, no one-size-fits-all religion or mindset. The more we accept that people need to explore and find their own path, the more we realize that to go in and have to pay cash money and pay $2,000 for one hour of therapy because of the way the medical system is set up is going to work against the people who need it the most. And this is the biggest problem I have with the psychedelics. They won't be covered by insurance. Therefore, people will pay out of pocket. So once again, those who can afford it and the wealthy will be able to get their medicine, whereas the people who can't won't. So they'll buy it on the corner like they always have. Well, not psychedelics. You generally have a dealer for that. But back in the 90s, you could walk down to Pioneer Square in Portland, look for the guy who looks you in the eye and touches his tongue, and he's the guy with acid. And you just go up and buy it. This was in a different world. A way different world before there were dozens of analogs of LSD and many different white powders out there. So this is why I urge caution, and I don't talk about these things very often. I don't want to urge or encourage anybody to take substances that they're not prepared for and don't have tested properly, and have somebody who is a guru or experienced sitter to help make sure that they don't go off the deep end when they consume them. Psychedelics can be intense. Ketamine can be as well, which I've discovered by practice. And it is something that for a person who's lesser prepared, it might make them want to get up and run away. But you can't get up and run away. You're there for the, you're down for the count. And in this state of mind, I can feel my brain fluid. It's almost like bursting through, and finally the walls of protection fall away. I believe the part of the brain, what is it called? I don't recall, but there's one particular part that gets shut down on psychedelics generally, and it's considered the conductor of the brain. The one that keeps everything in order, allows different areas to communicate. When that's shut down, and the frontal cortex is shut down, or prefrontal cortex, then our brains can finally start to communicate in other ways. We've let down our guard and our reason. You're basically setting aside your reason and processing skills in order to utilize deeper things in your brain. And yes, this is possible. For a person who's never been there, they don't understand. How could you lose your faculties of being able to reason and wander around and not be able to see anything very well, but still be coherent, be able to speak and think? It is possible, and it's a very strange place to be. And when a person is just on that verge of kind of being too far, there are some places that when you come back from them, you have very little doubt in your mind that there aren't other dimensions to this reality, because it's realer than real. It's like a lucid dream on steroids. And I guess these experiences have often given me comfort for my end of life situation, whatever may happen, or for the fact that memento mori, we all will die, and we know this is something I continuously remind myself of. I reminisce on death consistently, not all the time, but I think about it regularly, and I don't let it bother me because I know it's inevitable. And psychedelics really help people to prepare for this as well. So when people talk, I used to have this book called Breaking Open the Head by, I believe, Daniel Pinchbeck. And I was trying to think of a better definition, a better metaphor. I was thinking it's more like opening the hood. You can drive around with your hood closed and your car will run just fine, but eventually you might have a problem and you're going to have to open that hood. Once the hood's open, you're able to access all the parts. You're able to move things around, clean things up. And this is exactly what psychedelics do for us. Allow us to clean out parts of the brain. This is not going to be done taking a 5-strip of acid at a rave and going out and dancing in the desert. This can be done taking a moderate dose of a psychedelic, putting on a blindfold, headphones, and being in a very safe space, total solitude. And they are completely different experiences, like night and day. And once a person comes out of these experiences, it's usually life-changing. And I have always been an advocate of psychedelics. I will always continue to be. It feels awkward when I talk about them because I have young kids. I have boys that are, well, my oldest is 29 and he's experimented, but my youngest are 11 and 14, and I don't want them playing around with psychedelics, not until they're adults if they choose to. But that's why I'd rather have me speaking about these to people than some guy saying, yeah, drop all this acid, here, take a hero dose of mushrooms. No, we've got to teach each other. So for anybody who wants more information, there are plenty of resources online. Highly urge anybody who's curious to go to Erowid, EROWID.org, and look at their trip reports and their experiences over the years. They are a well-respected journal of psychedelia. And for anybody out there who is a psychonaut, a fellow psychonauts, caps off to you. Happy journeys. And thanks everybody for listening. I'm going to make this kind of short but sweet because I'm planning to do a longer deep dive about different psychedelics and their particular effects. I really am going to start my secondary channel up again, and I'm going to start posting them on there so they can be a collection in one area. But for now, it's like a spread the word thing, you know. I kind of lost hope because YouTube started banning and deleting all my videos and giving me strikes for dangerous content when I would talk about something that has been life-changing for me and many other people. The same thing happened with Kratom. The same thing happens with anything new or new to people that they don't understand. And it's always the underground that brings the awesome shit to the forefront first. So you all know, check out my podcast, 15-Minute Free Thinking. If you want to contribute, you can go to Patreon. Please leave a comment, hit the like button. I guess I have to say that because if I don't, people won't. So peace out. Safe travels.